Okay, on July 21st, 1969, which also happens to be my sister Amy's birthday, the first men then, landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong and what's the name of the other guy? Buzz Aldrin. Right, okay? It was, to say the least, a fantastic human achievement. I mean, really unbelievable. In fact, it's the kind of thing that humanity had waited about 5,000 years for. Since the first people crawled out of the savannah and looked up at the sky and saw the moon hanging there, it had enticed them. So the idea of flying to the moon filled human literature from the time of Nineveh and Tyre and the Old Testament right up until 1969 when they took off. The amazing thing from a technological point of view was that powered flight only happened in 1903 with the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk, which meant it had been about 60 years from the time the very first airplane flew 26 feet until people actually went to the moon, landed, walked around, and came back. It's astonishing. The arc of technology is absolutely astonishing. And now here comes the weird part, is that in 1972, which is also quite a long time ago, they made the last voyage to the moon, and no one has gone back since. The question is, why? Why has nobody gone back since? It's not like the technology was so sophisticated. Nobody drives around in 1969 Chevys. They're considered pretty primitive. All the computing power on the lunar landing craft could probably fit into your toaster today. And the cost of the entire lunar project was $25 billion. Even in 1969 dollars, it's next to nothing compared to the $1.2 trillion that was just added to the deficit, or the several trillion dollars that got spent just in Iraq and Afghanistan alone. So it's not a money issue and it's not a technology issue. I think it's another issue. And I think the issue here was going to the moon was bad TV. Unfortunately, the lunar landings took place on television, and it took place in a time when television had first exploded onto the American landscape. I mean, in the 1960s. Television was the fastest growing appliance in human history from the time it was first released, really, in the 1950s. And by the 1960s, 95% of Americans had television sets, even though they're only watching an astonishing 3 networks or 9 channels, including local. But it was a TV event. And I am old enough, because I am old enough to remember sitting in Camp Seneca in the bunk with the boys at night, watching Neil Armstrong climb down the ladder and say, "That's one small step for man and one small step for mankind." Okay? It was grainy, it was black and white, but it was absolutely riveting television. In fact, it got the largest television audience in history up until that time, 600 million viewers. There may have been bigger audiences then, particularly in the first season of Survivor American Idol. I'm not sure, but certainly it was the biggest television audience then, and it was a massive television event. But by the 3rd or 4th trip to the moon, not counting Apollo 13, which made a great movie, it was boring. Because first, it was grainy. Second, it was in black and white. But third, not a lot happened. I mean, the guys kind of bounced around on the moon. They had a moon rover that they drove around. Some guy took a golf club up there and hit a golf ball. But overall, going to the moon turned out to be crap TV. No interesting characters, no arc of story, no adventure and stuff like that. Now, ironically, at the same time that the lunar landings were taking place, another expedition into space took place, and the Starship Enterprise was launched. It was launched, of course, as on TV. The very same place that the lunar landings were actually happening in real time. So, in a funny way, they competed against each other. The lunar landings with guys in clunky suits bouncing around in the dust in bad pictures, or Captain Kirk and the Enterprise flying off at warp speed, going to other planets, attacking Klingons and guys in red suits, beating people up and getting vaporized. Needless to say, Star Trek turned out to be a lot more exciting than real-life moon landings. That's why the moon landing show was canceled in 1972 and has not been renewed, and that is why the Star Trek franchise, some 55 years later, is still going strong. CBS just launched yet another iteration of it. On the heels of that came Star Wars, which was even bigger than Star Trek, and that took place on the big screen. You couldn't rent a movie theater and put real-life moon landings on the screen because nobody would pay $1 for it, let alone $12 to go and see the latest iteration of Star Wars. So we entered into an interesting kind of dichotomy. The fact is that real-life moon landings and fictional space adventures took place on the same screen that you were watching it, whether it was your TV set or on your phone now with Star Trek CBS or on Netflix, on your tablet or on your phone or wherever else. And nobody goes to Netflix to watch, you know what, there's a NASA channel, but nobody goes to the NASA channel to watch real-life adventures of, guys on the space station because it is boring. And boredom is the kiss of death for anything that happens on television. Now, the funny thing is it wouldn't make any difference because this is science, and science shouldn't be married to entertainment. But in our culture it is because we live and die based on what's on the screen. So real-life science, like destroying the planet through global warming, is also crap television. I mean, you can see great movies about giant floods or tsunamis or whatever kind of stuff Hollywood can manufacture, and or galactic battles, and people will pay $12 each, and Wakanda, right? It's great TV, it's great entertainment, but it's not real. The fact that we get our factual information and our entertainment through the same exact screen and the same exact medium is, to be honest, confusing. And most people, I understand intellectually they can separate it, but emotionally they can't really separate it. That's why the Donald Trump show gets such fantastic ratings. Not because the guy is such a genius, but because he is fantastic television, for better or for worse. It's entertaining. It may be frightening, but it is entertaining. The Hillary Clinton show, like the landing on the moon, may have been more real, but they were both equally boring. Nobody wanted to watch another guy hit a golf ball on the moon, and nobody wanted to spend 4 years watching the Hillary Clinton show from the White House. So they both got canceled. And what gets renewed is stuff that is entertaining and exciting and scary, but it doesn't have to be real. So we've entered an interesting world in which reality and fiction, truth and lies, are essentially the same thing. And the reason it's the same thing is because everything comes through this stupid screen. And the stupid screen only exists if you watch it. And you only watch it if it's interesting and exciting and entertaining. And the problem with watching 8.5 hours of screening every single day is that it's like shooting up heroin, which I have never done, but I've done other drugs. So I can tell you that the first time it's a hit, and then after that it gets boring. So it takes more and more and more to get to that same level of stimulation. The same thing is true with screen-based information. So trips to the moon, they are boring. I mean, Elon Musk, he had a great TV thing when he launched his new thing and put his car with the dummy into orbit around the Earth. That was great. And then Jeff Bezos followed up with his SpaceX capsule. It was terrible. Come on, Jeff, make it more entertaining. Put a dummy in the capsule. Have some characters. Have some adventure. Have a death. Go build a death ray. You got a lot of money. Go and do something interesting. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. The only things that happen in our culture, the only things that succeed, are things that are entertaining and amusing. That may be fun for the short run, but in the long run, it's probably pretty damn dangerous.